Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and this is the third of that Princessy trilogy by Jessica Day George, the one that started with Princess of the Midnight Ball. You may have guessed, based on this cover image, that yes, this is a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. So, in the course of this retelling, what happens is one of the youngest of the princesses, the youngest, I believe, actually, has basically, in the last book, we knew that the king had sent most of his daughters out to various other countries in Ionia, that is, Europe, not Europe, as sort of a political effort to, improve foreign relations. And by the end of that, several of them come back engaged and so on. This youngest one, she was extremely young when everything happened, and in point of fact, during the course of this book, a couple of her sisters say, "Oh, we thought you didn't remember," and she's like, "I was, 7? I remembered stuff from when I was that young." Because, let's be honest, the cutoff point for most people, not remembering stuff really is roughly around 3 or 4, that most people don't remember things before that there's some kind of brain turnover point at around 3 or 4, and we sort of are, memories sort of stick from that point onward only. Or at least so I'm given to understand. But the point is that she remembers all of those years of dancing, but she has a very interestingly different take on it than the rest of her sisters, and a good part of that is the fact that her mother died died when she was so very, very young, that unlike the others who had a great many years of not having to be pulled under by the king understone and having to dance for him, of having a normal life in which that wasn't an obligation, so that they really, really resented it, but she was 2 the first time that she got dragged into the King Understone's domain. And as she put it, this was normal. That, yes, when she got pneumonia and was very sick and didn't want to go, that was miserable, but it was just her life. And so unlike the others, several of whom have developed a violent aversion to dancing, she has not, because that was just how things were. She didn't hate it. She didn't find it terrifying. I mean, no, she didn't want to marry the prince that she was forced to dance with all those years. She didn't particularly want to, stay under stone and all of that stuff, but she was very, very much used to it. And so she does tend to have a slightly different perspective on this, in no small part that she is much less afraid than the others, because I suspect that it really boils down to she doesn't have a before and after interacting with the King Understone. She just has, that's always been there. So there's that. But anyways, she got sent overseas to Rusaka, that is, you may have guessed, Russia, where she meets a Grand Duchess who turns out to be one of the 9 daughters of the Russian kings, that they're sort of, local dramatic tales about. And indeed, those 9 sisters, those 9 princesses, are 9 of the mothers of the King Understone's 12 sons. And so she doesn't know this. What she knows is that she got sent overseas, and her father had sent her with a letter, well-intentioned, where he had said that she's too delicate to dance because so many of her sisters hated dancing. He just assumed, not irrationally, that she would also not want to dance. And so when she got sent to Russia on this trip, she finds herself at balls and parties where all of the young people are dancing, and because a letter has been sent saying she is too delicate to do this, she's stuck basically sitting on the sidelines with the wallflowers who won't talk to anybody and all of the old people. And it's kind of miserable because she's a vivacious young girl who wants to spend time with other young people her own age, not spend time with a million, ancient, elderly, nobility who want to talk about what old people talk about. And that's not fun. And she's a kid. She wants to have fun. So we get to the start of this book, and she's about 16 in this one. And she is on a trip to stay with this Grand Duchess from Rusaka who has an estate in her home country. And as she and her maid are traveling through the woods by carriage, they get set upon by a bunch of local highwaymen going around wearing wolf masks. And so through various events, she winds up separated from people and taken back to the home of the wolf mask group of highwaymen. And it turns out that what they are is the displaced family and household of the Duke who used to live at what is now the Russian Duchess's estate. That is, at the end of their war that had just ended at the start of the first book, there was a sort of a redistribution of things along the border as part of the treaty negotiations, and the king had basically just handed off that land under the impression that nobody lived there, in effect. That whoever owned it had died in the war and that there was nobody there. And so what happened was the old duke had died, leaving his very young son as the actual duke, and so the son and his widow and everybody sort of get abruptly booted out of their home, totally unexpectedly, and find as well that a great many of their lands have just been handed over to the neighboring Andalusia, which is not Spain. And so they turned to banditry because they couldn't really think of any way to keep surviving where they were. And, it was sort of this awkward place of they don't have anywhere to go and they don't have any funds and they don't have any way to support people, and so they turned to banditry. And Petunia, the princess in this, finds all of this out and, among other things, promises herself that she will talk to the king, her father, to figure out how to fix this, because none of this would have happened if he hadn't taken away their land. But she also wants to go see this Russian Grand Duchess, because the Russian Grand Duchess was very, very kind to her when she was in, Rusaka. It's not Russia. And the Rusakan Duchess was very kind to her, was kind of a very grandmotherly figure, and also has a very, very handsome son. And so she's interested in, going on the rest of her trip and making her way there. And in the due course of events, we find out that the Grand Duchess is the mother of the mother of the King Understone's eldest son, who had become king after the king had been killed in the first book, and that the surviving court and others are managing to rattle their cage and are on the verge of escaping. And so we have a big dramatic denouement. The big thing that bothers me about it, actually, is that at the end of the book, we have several magicians, wizards, sorcerers, whatever, show up. And they are the many centuries old sorcerers who had locked away the king under stone the first time, because he had apparently sold his soul to the devil and had become so powerful that they couldn't just kill him. All they could do was lock him up. But I have one big problem with this. It's that I find that the woman who they call the Good Frau, who is a former queen and an ancient sorceress and so on and so forth, is frankly hams up being the crotchety old lady just a little too much, in that Petunia has a love interest, Oliver. He is the Duke who is the head of the, local bunch of footpads who have been attacking people to steal their money. And, when he says things like, what are we going to do? The sorcerers who did this are dead. It's been centuries. They're not still alive. And she looks at him and says, well, he's clearly not as bright as anybody thought. And she's constantly making these snide comments to Oliver as though somehow a person who is living in the real world, where he basically found out that all of this magic was actually real literally like a week ago, the fact that he is not wholly up on what's happening, the fact that he thought that 3 centuries later somebody from 3 centuries ago might not still be alive, these are rational thoughts. And her being snide about it, her constantly picking at him, and then, when he expresses some sort of doubts about her and then apologizes and she says, yes, I will only forgive you because I was once a queen. And it's like, you shouldn't be forgiving him anything because he hasn't done anything to forgive. He has expressed a perfectly reasonable and rational doubt about what's happening because he has no reason to know anything. Yeah, okay, you had a magic cloak. That doesn't mean you are a sorceress of legend. It means you have a magic cloak. And it's just, I don't like her. I really, really don't like her. And I get the feeling in this book that we are supposed to find her as sort of a grand, sweeping character, somebody with, this tremendous mystery of, what she was queen of and what was she like in her prime and so on and so forth. But, and I think maybe that is actually explained somewhere in the books, which she was queen of. But the point is that I feel like we're supposed to look at her with some awe and some appreciation and give a chuckle at his discomfiture, but I really, really, really dislike it when you have this mockery of somebody who has no reason to know otherwise, and, and to act as though somehow it's a character flaw for somebody to be rational and restrained in his expectations about how the world is going to work. It's rather like that scene in Harry Potter, Order of the Phoenix, when Harry Potter is shocked to discover that people have been watching him all summer, and he's told, well, I thought you were smart. You should have known that somebody was spying on you all summer. And I look at that and I feel like, why should he expect that? Why should he expect that his whole summer spent alone and isolated with, nothing and no one telling him anything? Why should he expect that people would be spying on him? And this has very much the same flavor of that to me. It's a fun book, and Petunia is really, really interestingly different precisely because she's so much less terrified than the others in a general way. But it's a good time, and it resolves the story quite well, too. So, yeah, I think that's everything, and I will see you all next week.